All right, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and side hustlers everywhere. It's time for another episode of the Seven Figures Club podcast, the podcast that helps you to join the 5% or sometimes 7%, depends on which study you're taking, but a very small percentage of business owners who generate seven figures a year in sales and revenue, who are really growing and creating a business that they love and not a business that runs them. Today's guest, Heather Dominick, is going to be someone who is going to put you in situations where you can grow, where you can get better. And she does it through small miracles because she is the Business Miracles founder. So she's also the founder of a course in Business Miracles. And since 2010, so we're talking 12 years, she's been training highly sensitive entrepreneurs. We're going to define what that means and see, where you fit in that. But she is definitely a leader. She teaches other entrepreneurs and leaders to do things differently by working less, making more of a social impact and a higher income. So probably working more on the business instead of always in, which is a tricky thing that we're going to unpack today. And she's also taken everything that she's learned from being a highly sensitive person. I've been self-employed since 2003, including her journey from personal bankruptcy to being the consistent steward of a seven-figure mission, and poured it into the comprehensive design of the highly sensitive leadership training programs. So you have everything you need to learn how to excel in your business and life. Well, very excited to connect up with you today, Heather. How is it going?
There are over 32 million businesses in the U.S., and over 90% of them will never break seven figures in annual sales. So how do we as entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs break into that seven figures club? This podcast will relentlessly share the secrets, strategies, and tactics I've used to create three multi-seven figures businesses and bring in even more successful entrepreneurs than me to share their inspirational stories and tactics to success. You can create your dream business and life right now. So buckle up and let's go.
It's great. It's great, Leo. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I just really love the energy of your podcast. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you on. And one of the first questions where we like to begin is just learning a little bit more about your background. You've been self-employed or a business owner now for 2 decades. You've served a lot of entrepreneurs and helped them grow. But what was it? What were some of the different events or, key things that led you towards entrepreneurship, maybe in your upbringing or as you were going through school? Maybe your first job or career, what finally, led you to say, wow, maybe being my own boss and determining, the direction of my life as a business owner, as an entrepreneur is my direction where I want to go. What were some of those key events that led you down that path?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I definitely do not have the stereotypical entrepreneurial journey. I did sell Girl Scout cookies, and
well, that's good.
The process totally terrified me. I found it extremely intimidating. Yeah, I did sell enough one year to get myself to Girl Scout camp in the summer. So I was not a failure in any regard. But I was not that kid who was like, oh, let me just see whatever entrepreneurial, thing I can possibly do. In all honesty, I am a teacher. I am a teacher at heart. That was my first career. I was actually a high school and drama teacher for 8 years. Nice. I would say a catalyst moment that shifted me in perspective from working in the traditional classroom to now all the very creative and innovative ways that I am still a teacher within my own business. That moment was, I would say, 9/11. So I was teaching at a school that was just over a mile from ground zero on that day. And then, living in New York City on the days that, just day in and day out after that, really, just massive event for so many of us. But definitely for those of us who were in the city at the time, it had everyone kind of questioning, right? And so I think that was really the beginning for me. I just had a sense that I was meant to be doing something more beyond the traditional classroom, and began taking the steps soon thereafter.
Wow, unbelievable. So 8 years as a teacher, helping and connecting with education of our kids, amazing. And then 9/11 happens. It's interesting. I was actually just I don't know if you're familiar of those I Survived books that are for kids, and I was reading one to my 6-year-old the other day, and it was I Survived 9/11. And it was interesting just realizing, wow, he's 6, he has no idea what 9/11 was, and it was a really
Right.
well put together book to educate him on what that was and how that changed so many things in America. So it was a powerful thing. So for you, that was an event that occurred, and you're like, wow, I meant to do more. Life is short. Like, there's all these uncertainties around. So what
Yes.
was kind of your next step of starting, your own thing?
So I always had an interest in nutrition and wellness. So the
Yeah.
year following 9/11, literally after I started recovering from the trauma, because that was
Oh, yeah.
definitely those, first 6 to 9 months, I found a certification program in nutrition and
Yeah.
wellness coaching. And I had never heard of anything along those lines before. I went through that training while I was still working full time as a teacher. And part of that training was an additional course that you could take on how to start a business. And so I did. And it was literally, I think, a good dose of full naivete that, had me propelled to then take the next actions of, actually leaving my full-time tenured position and
Oh,
taking
wow.
the risk and diving in.
So what gave you the confidence to take that risk?
Again, I think it really goes back to living through those days, following 9/11. It was
Yeah.
just a very different, just a different sense in the air of, seize the day and now more than ever. And again, a good dose of naivete that I just didn't know what I was doing. So yeah, and then just, piecing it together and following the breadcrumbs from that point on. I started in nutrition and wellness. I eventually shifted into business coaching for others who were in the wellness arena. And then the business evolved from there into the focus and support of the highly sensitive entrepreneur, which, as you beautifully shared at the beginning, has been my my path and my mentorship since 2010.
Unbelievable. So yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs, we get started, and a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, do have big hearts, and they are 100% focused on being passionate and serving their dream client and getting them the results, something that they have gotten really good at as an entrepreneur, whether it's a product, whether it's a service that they're providing solutions for their customers, for their clients. And so there is a big vision. They are doing it for more than just the money. Of course, the money certainly plays a part, and the independence and the ability to control their own destiny. But for a lot of entrepreneurs out there, small business owners who are listening to this podcast are wondering, how would you define a highly sensitive entrepreneur? And if we're being honest, there's probably a lot of us that fit into that category, but how would you kind of define that so our listeners and anyone watching this video can, kind of assess, where am I and what does that mean exactly?
Yes, such a great question. So first of all, the term highly sensitive is not coined by me. It comes out of research that really began in the mid 1990s. Dr. Elaine Aron is most well known for her research on the highly sensitive person. She's most well known because she wrote the book. the highly sensitive person. And so, in short, what it means to be a highly sensitive person is that your nervous system is wired to take in stimulation at a much higher degree than someone who's not highly sensitive. That stimulation could be anything from sight to sound to smells to touch to information to energy, emotions. And because of the nervous system's wiring, you will have a very different experience with processing the world than someone who is not highly sensitive. For myself, I was at a real turning point in my self-employed journey. It was about 2008. I hadn't yet been, self-employed for a decade. I brought my business across the $1 million mark, the 7-figure mark,
Nice.
for the first time. And, whenever I share this part of my story, I always like to say, and I wish that I could say, that the clouds parted and, balloons came raining down and unicorns started carrying me everywhere and fairies started doing my dishes. And none of that happened. It was actually the exact opposite. I was massively overwhelmed. I was overworked. I was overexhausted and really questioning everything that I was doing. And was this what I was meant to continue doing? And if so, how could it possibly be different? And through that experience, I was led to Dr. Elaine Aron and learned that I was a highly sensitive person. I didn't have that awareness before that time. Understanding that I was highly sensitive started really making a lot of things click into place, and why I was feeling the impact of what it meant to create this kind of business, quote unquote, success, when others, who were in the same coaching programs with me, going to the same training seminars, they were not overwhelmed. They were not overexhausted. They were not overworked. They were energized and excited and, going for the next kill. And understanding I was highly sensitive, I realized oh, okay. So if I'm going to continue this journey of being self-employed, I'm going to have to really start to do things differently. I'm going to have to do them in a different way that works with how my nervous system is wired. Because the opposite of trying to make myself into something that I'm not, that is not working. And that is going to put me in an early grave. So let's not do that, but let me figure out a way to do it differently. And that's what I did. And as I did, I started realizing that a lot of the clients I was already coaching, that they were also highly sensitive. And that really began and birthed the highly sensitive entrepreneurial movement. And now what is the highly sensitive leadership training programs.
So Heather, as you kind of define, I think there's certainly a lot of times that entrepreneurs, leaders, small business owners kind of feel this overwhelm, and maybe even at some point define it as kind of burnout. Is that another phrase that you would kind of attach that would be similar in the same vein as being overwhelmed that a lot of these highly sensitive entrepreneurs have?
It's another great question. The way I like to answer that is, everyone is overwhelmed these days, right? And yet for a person who's highly sensitive, the overwhelm isn't just a matter of a too long to-do list. The overwhelm is literally a visceral and physical experience where the system begins to literally shut down because the stimulation is just too much. It's too high. So there's cultural overwhelm, and then there's the physiological and physical highly sensitive overwhelm. So the work that I do is teaching the highly sensitive person how to work with their nervous system differently, to support in not going into that overwhelmed state as an automatic reaction. And then therefore being more available to manage and handle a lot of that long to-do list that comes with being self-employed or taking on, any significant type of, leadership or success project.
And so would anxiety and some of those components also be, interconnected in there too?
Absolutely, right? Because it's our nervous system. So in, my own practical research, anxiety tends to be like an after effect of that high stimulation of the nervous system. And until, again, you learn how to work with the nervous system differently, which is the trainings, the teachings, and the tools that I provide, so that ideally we don't really get to that anxiety state place. Of course, highly sensitive or not, we're all human. Anxiety is, part of our day to day, and it's definitely part of being self-employed because there's, such an element of unknown and uncertainty and risk. But yet the degree with which we can minimize being in that anxious state, then we're actually more available to be creative and productive, which is, part of why so many of us who are highly sensitive feel drawn to be self-employed. We feel drawn to be self-employed because it does energize one of our highly sensitive strengths, which is of being creative. And it also supports our call as highly sensitives to be of service. That tends to be the primary motivator for most highly sensitives who are self-employed. They really feel a calling to provide something of purpose, right? And of service to the world.
And so as kind of a highly sensitive entrepreneur, and you have some of these anxieties, some of these concerns, how does that factor into your position as a leader generally in your business and also with your clients?
Yes. So when a highly sensitive is what I like to refer to as high functioning, meaning they're in that more masterful place of managing their nervous system to be working for them rather than against them, then they really have access to, I've created a list of top 12 strengths that we have in our easy access. Again, when we're in that high functioning place as a highly sensitive, some of those strengths are creativity, as I mentioned earlier. We're also extremely intuitive. Empathy is one of our strengths. The ability to be deep listening, deep thinking, deep feeling are all strengths. When you're in that position to be able to access your highly sensitive strengths, that really sets you up to be a very effective leader. And then it also sets you up to be a very effective service-based entrepreneur. So that's the place that we want to be in. And then, of course, that just is a more fulfilling experience. And then, of course, that just creates very positive, results as well, versus constantly feeling like you're up against trying to work your way through that anxiety. So that's really the juxtaposition, is to be in that strength place as much as possible.
For sure. And I think a lot of people listening right now are certainly, understanding and comprehending this topic a lot better. And I think a lot of them are saying, boy, I do seem to have some of these tendencies that maybe a highly sensitive entrepreneur has, but maybe isn't quite sure if they're the perfect fit, or to what extent they kind of are in that situation, and how much they need to be able to take action and get access to the right training to make sure that this is, something that they can resolve. So is there some way that they can, find out on a deeper level, how, highly sensitive they are as an entrepreneur?
Yes, definitely. So I have a free quiz, which is really an assessment. And because you don't pass or fail, you just, you take the quiz, you take the assessment, and at the end, you'll find out if you're either somewhat of a highly sensitive entrepreneur, or if you're a super highly sensitive entrepreneur, or if you happen to be like me and you are a super uber highly sensitive entrepreneur. And wherever you fall, somewhat or super uber, you'll also receive a free success guide that will give you the first steps to start to work with your nervous system. And I will say also that if you are listening and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound like me at all, of course, no worries, really good to know that and understand that for yourself. But I will say this, is that the research from the 1990s shows us that there are 20% of us in the world who are highly sensitive. So if you're not highly sensitive, very likely someone on your team, or even someone in your family, or someone in your friend or colleague circle probably is highly sensitive. And it can be really, really helpful and effective, especially for those who are seven-figure driven, to really understand who's on your team and how to work with your team most effectively. And that would include knowing who the highly sensitives on your team happen to be.
Yeah, no question. Well, and so Heather, where exactly can they go to get that free quiz? Because I think that's something everybody listening right now, as an entrepreneur, the more you can get to know who you are. I mean, the one person you can't lie to at the end of the day is yourself. And so understanding your own dynamics and strengths and weaknesses and the actions that you can take to help get the right mindset, because the right mindset will be the difference between success and failure so often as an entrepreneur. Where can they go to take this free quiz?
Yes, all so well said. You can take the free quiz at www.hsequiz.com. hsequiz.com.
Perfect, guys. So again, hsequiz.com. Again, this is not a passive podcast. This is a podcast where together as a community, we take action. So go and take that quiz at hsequiz.com so that you can get more information and learn a little bit more about yourself and where you're at as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, especially if you're trying to do something big and you feel this calling to serve, but there's this overwhelm, there's this anxiety, different things, that are on your mind and bothering you. I wonder, Heather, if you have kind of a case study example to where you can kind of share, and don't necessarily need to mention names, but what's kind of a case study example of someone who's going through this as a highly sensitive entrepreneur, struggling with some of, especially I feel like the anxiety, and a lot of super successful people do. I've known there's Super Bowl winning quarterbacks that have had kind of these issues, and certainly a lot of very successful entrepreneurs as well. And they've been able to find ways to cope and deal with them. What's kind of a case study example of how this works and where you can, really see the transformation of where someone's at and where they can get to?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And well, there's just so many members of the Business Miracles community who are going through the highly sensitive leadership training programs and the shifts, right? The transformation that has occurred. As I was listening to you, there is one member that came to mind, and I think she came to mind because her business is in more of the corporate setting. So her business does a lot of research for corporations and research specifically to help corporations understand what may or may not be working, either within their own marketing and or operations and team setup. And when she and I first connected, she's a very, very intelligent woman, and she shares the business with her husband, and they're a fantastic duo team. Yet she was very wired, right? Like she was just very intense, and that anxiety that we've been talking about was really driving the actions that she was taking in her business. And, and as you've been saying, like, this is very common, right? Especially when you're in those more startup years. Yet, especially if you're a person who's highly sensitive, as I experienced myself, as well as I shared earlier, that intensity driving or trying to live in that space of anxiety as motivation will wear on you to the potential, really difficult detriment, right? Health, relationships, etc. Where she has been able to go through learning how to manage her nervous system, one is she is so much calmer. She, as a result, is an excellent team leader and has really built a phenomenal team and culture, and is so much more happy and harmonious within her relationship. And the business has gone from more around that, mid to high seven figures into a multi-million business space and zone, and really creating some incredible positive impact within the sphere of corporate culture along the way. So that's just, one example that comes to mind. And, another personal aspect of that transformation for her is then in this past year, she also ran her first marathon. So,
very awesome.
Yeah. So pretty great to be a part of that journey with her.
Oh, phenomenal. Some of my takeaways is more calm, right? Sometimes as a leader with all that overwhelms, so many different things you have to tackle. If you are not calm, oftentimes you're making poor decisions that are having a negative impact for you and your team. And then the other thing that I'll highlight there is you mentioned that her relationship with her family improved too. And I feel like that's also something that we can struggle with as entrepreneurs, is trying to keep the family at work and then the family at home and keep both well taken care of. And when you're an entrepreneur, that is your job, to take care of both of those families.
Yes.
And so the ability to do that and to manage those emotions. And then once you do, you're going to create a better culture. You're going to become a better leader, for your team and for your family, because you're a leader typically of your family as well. And so, Heather, I think everybody has learned a lot with the value bombs you've dropped in today's episode. And now the next step is, what's the next step for them to connect with you, and where can they go to learn more about some of these resources and tools so that they can get the right mindset as a sensitive entrepreneur and person, and learn some of these skills to grow as an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. So in addition to the free quiz, hsequiz.com, you can find more resources and support and more about myself at businessmiracles.com, businessmiracles.com.
That's a pretty good URL title right there, businessmiracles.com. That's a very valuable website address and pretty easy for everybody. So check out businessmiracles.com. She has her Highly Sensitive Leadership Revolution book that you can buy right there on the website, the free quiz, so that you can sort of classify yourself and see to what extent some of these challenges are holding you back as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as somebody who wants to have a successful business and family, which most of us are probably in that category. And there's a lot of challenges, and getting that right mindset is certainly going to be positive and make a great impact. So check that out at businessmiracles.com. And Heather, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Leo. This is just such a fantastic podcast. So appreciate it.
Are you looking for more seven-figure secrets, content, or even how you can launch your own recession-proof business? Then check out sevenfigures.com. That's the digit 7, FIGURES.com, where we share more videos, stories, strategies, funding solutions, entrepreneurial education, and even the secret business type that's recession-proof. Thank you for listening, and if you're finding value in our podcast, please give us a 5-star and invite others to join the club.